Welcome everyone to Forthright Solutions Spotlight Series. I'm Kristen from Forthright, and we're thankful for your time today. Every month we showcase a different solution from our trusted technology partners that solves a challenge or problem we're seeing in the industry. This month we're featuring IGEL. If you have any questions at any point in the webinar, please type your questions in the chat box, and if we can't answer them right away, we have time saved at the end for questions. Today's headliners. We have Matt from Forthright, Steve from Forthright, Doug from IGEL, and Carl from IGEL. And they're going to be giving lots of information this afternoon to everyone. But before we dive into all that, we just want to see where everyone currently stands with endpoint security and user experience. So I'm going to throw out a few polls. If you guys could just take a few minutes to answer those, just so we can see where everyone is. There's the first one. How important is your user experience to your company? It looks like most people think it is important, though most say they could use some improvement. So what are your biggest concerns or challenges with your work from home employees? So it looks like security and then support are the biggest challenges people are facing. Just a quick yes or no. Are you concerned about meeting compliance requirements with your work from home users? And that's an overwhelming yes to that answer the question. Do you have high turnover or significant seasonality with your work from home users? Looks like mostly no to this question. And with that, I am going to hand the mic over to Steve, who's going to talk a little bit about what we do at Forthright.
Thanks, Kristen. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to start by thanking all of you for joining us today. I'm going to tell you that we're going to have a great session. This is going to be a fantastic spotlight series, an event today. I'm Steve Zoberg, COO at Forthright. And for those of you who have joined us but haven't worked with Forthright before, I wanted to give you a very quick 4 to 5 minute intro, and then we'll move on. You know, Forthright's been helping our clients optimize their application delivery for decades. And for us, it's more than just tools and technology. It's really about how do you supercharge your end user experiences. And so much so that I'll tell you that we built our entire practice around being user-centric in everything we do. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that our passion and our focus is not only centered around what tools or products we might be selling or the processes that might be optimal for us, but rather we put ourselves in your shoes. We pay very close attention to the experiences and the outcomes that specific technology choices actually have on your end user population and your business outcomes. So I'll tell you that over the years, we've recognized that most of our clients, they fall into one of 3 categories. Some of you need consulting services around strategic initiatives or prototyping new technologies. Others they just need additional resources, right, for day-to-day operations or new projects. And the final group is those are businesses that essentially want to reduce their operational costs. They want to focus on their core business. And so they'll look to Forthright to take over full responsibility for specific technology sets. Now, regardless of where you may fall, we've got 6 core service offerings that basically address all of these needs. And some of our clients might use 1 or 2, others actually use all of them. And if any of this resonates to you and you'd like to talk more about any of these services, we'd love to have that conversation. And feel free to call our office and reach out to Matt or send us an email at success@forthright.com, and we'd love to have a dialogue. So enough with the PSA for Forthright. Let's talk about our spotlight conversation. And today it's all focused around thin client admins, what their experience is. What do they face when they're supporting work from home end users? And really, of course, what is the work from home experience like for most of your users? So the question today for all of us is, how do we effectively deploy work from home environments securely and at the same time deliver an exceptional experience? When we all know the truth, remote work creates huge liabilities and challenges. I mean, your users are no longer in the office where we get to control all the variables. So our panelists today, well, we're going to talk about this particular topic and specifically how when we leverage IGEL, well, it's an absolute game changer when we're delivering the ultimate work from home experience. And I am really, really excited to introduce basically legends in our industry, Carl Gersh and Doug Brown, to all of you. And Carl, how about you kick off the conversation?
Sure. I mean, let me first just take a quick moment to bask in the fact that I get mentioned within the same breath as Doug Brown, who truly is a legend. I want to get into a rousing conversation about end user computing, security, user experience. Before we do that, just as Steve talked a little bit about Forthright, I want to give a quick overview on who IGEL is today. A lot of you may think of IGEL, as a thin client company if you know us, but the truth is there's much more. IGEL is much more than that. And to understand IGEL, first thing to kind of understand is our vision, right? And our goal is to transform the way the world works. We want to create better outcomes for people, for organizations, and for the planet. And I made the joke that, they say, let's keep it brief in the overview on IGEL. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. I'm just going to go way back to the start of IT. Somewhat tongue in cheek, but the truth is that if we want to understand the greater context of what's going on and where IGEL fits in, I do want to do a little walk down memory lane because I want to go back to 1981 when Microsoft released MS-DOS, right, an operating system. Because IGEL is an operating system company as well, and we'll get to that. So in 81, Microsoft released MS-DOS, and that was pretty remarkable. It was remarkable that a company could take an operating system, something that typically was like considered something like a breeder reactor, right? You don't think of an operating system as a productized type of offering, but they did. They created a product called MS-DOS, and it was wildly successful. And then we fast forward about 15 years to 95 when they did something also equally remarkable, right? They took their windowing system, and for purposes of just keeping the nomenclature kind of current, you call it a windowing system, I want to call it a workspace, right? They took their workspace and they bolted it on and tied it inexorably to the operating system. That was Windows 95, right? And if you were around back then working in IT or just an IT enthusiast, that 95 there's some discontent because we were like, hey, I don't want to have a workspace tied to my OS. I want my OS I want to run stuff from the command line. But Microsoft was the 800-pound gorilla, and they said, nope, you get operating system and workspace melded into one. And if you move forward, the truth is that in this day and age, if you say to someone, hey, imagine an operating system, what they typically are imagining is the workspace. But that did change a little bit. In 2019, something equally, I think, remarkable happened. That's when Microsoft then took those two things apart. And they said, hey, we're going to take the workspace and we're going to put it up in the cloud. And they called it Windows Virtual Desktop. And in doing that, it sort of raises some questions about, okay, well, if we're going to move the workspace to the cloud, what do we run on the endpoint? And in a slightly different view, right, if I want to get like a little more academic, I can say, look, we're in a third era of computing, right? First era, didn't talk about much at all. It's mainframes and terminals, right? Great. Ancient history. Era 2 was a 30-year era when we were looking at fat client computing attaching to servers, when client server, and then eventually, it got ported and they were accessing servers in, over the internet. But the truth is we are now in a third era of computing where we're looking at cloud workspaces where your applications, your data are all residing in a cloud. And the truth is that you do not need a fat client operating system to access those resources. What you need an operating system that is purpose-built specifically for the function of, cloud workspaces. And if I was going to put a funny image together, I'd say that trying to access a cloud workspace using a fat client is akin to putting a horse in front of a car, right? You're not getting the benefit of the automobile if you're having a horse pull it along. I found this great image from 1911, 1913, when the cars started coming out, to kind of illustrate this point, right? So this modality of saying, let's take this 30-year-old operating system that has been coddled and kind of moved along, and let's use that to try and access our cloud workspace is not optimal. And that's what brings us to what IGEL is all about, right? IGEL, we are the next gen edge operating system specifically built for cloud workspaces. And what that means is that we build an operating system that is very simple to deploy, simple to use. It means we've created an operating system that is very smart. It's economically smart to deploy. And we create an operating system, most importantly, that's secure. Because when you're accessing, cloud resources, you want to eliminate that vulnerability at the endpoint. And at a architecture perspective, what this means is that regardless of where your users reside, be them at home, where, let's face it, most of them are today, or in this place called the office, which was very popular pre-2020, or like anywhere else, right? You want them to access their apps and desktops from whatever cloud provider you choose, right? So it could be Citrix with CVAD, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops. It could be VMware, it could be Microsoft, it could be AWS, Nutanix iFrame, you name it. If you want to access a cloud workspace, IGEL is the operating system that can get you there. And not only provide that great user experience, but also give you that layer of management so you can control, you can see what's going on at those endpoints and manage those. So I talked about three kind of virtues of IGEL. First being simplicity, right? And IGEL is very easy to roll out. So you can roll out IGEL and manage thousands of endpoints, tens of thousands of endpoints from a single management console. We have a retailer out there that sells sunglasses and eyeglasses. I can't say who they are. Chances are you probably know the name. And they were managing 7,000 locations, over 13,000 endpoints, with a single full-time admin. So it's very easy for IT to manage. And I noticed in the survey, we talked about support and support of remote users, right? So having an operating system that's custom purpose built for the idea of providing easy support through single pane of glass is important. It was a little bit smarter, and I said smarter economically, right? So when you use a thin purpose-built operating system, you can extend the life of your existing PCs anywhere from 3 to 5 years. The average IGEL customer saves on average 72% per month if they extend the life out 5 years on their devices. You can also save power. It's very green, right? And because it's got a universal set of protocols, you can work with anything. So again, whatever cloud workspace you want to access, you can do that. And then finally, the most important thing we're going to talk a lot about today is security, right? So IGEL was built from the ground up to be ultra secure, right? So it is a read-only operating system. So regardless of how you deploy IGEL, we'll talk about it very quickly, it is a read-only OS. It also, if you have mixed use or hybrid use machines where you don't want to install the IGEL operating system on machines, we have something called the UD which is the IGEL operating system running off of a USB stick. Insert that stick, you're good to go. And that kind of talks about like how do you get IGEL, and I'd love to maybe come back to this at the end too after we've talked more about security. But IGEL is an operating system company, so you can just buy our software, install it on devices you've already got. You can use our UD Pocket to insert and go, or you can purchase the devices from us. We sell thin client devices. We have a full range. I'd say they're the Mercedes-Benz of thin clients, since we're a German manufacturer, but perhaps it's maybe a little too on the nose. But they do come with an industry-leading 5-year warranty. If you need a bulletproof endpoint, and who doesn't, IGEL is the resource for that. I mentioned the UD Pocket. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about it today. If you want to get a free demo UD Pocket, just go to igel.com/UD Pocket. You can request your UD Pocket. It comes with a free, no questions asked, 30-day trial. If you want to extend that trial by another 60 days, just fill out a registration form. Again, no cost, just register it, and you get another 60 days for a total 90 days trial with UD Pocket. So again, igel.com/UD Pocket to request your free UD Pocket. Okay, and then finally, we talked a little bit about management. Our UMS, I think Matt can attest, the universal management suite that we provide that is free of cost when you deploy IGEL gives you, again, that single pane of glass. Everyone talks about single pane of glass. It's truly a single pane of glass to view all of your endpoints, to manage profiles, to do secure shadowing, everything you need. And again, if you've got users out there, end users out there who you want to be able to troubleshoot and be able to support them, the UMS gives you a great way to do that. Again, this operating system was built to be managed. And then we'll talk, one final thing. There's a promo we're doing with Forthright. I think IGEL makes workspaces pretty cool places, cloud workspaces. We want to make your home workspace just as cool. So we're giving away a $20,000 home office makeover. The drawing is going to be next month in December. To enter, you just go to workspacecoolplace.com, use the code Forthright, and you're in, and you can be entered to win that. We did a drawing last year for a car, and I think the winning entry did come in the month before the drawing. So there's still plenty of opportunity to win. Go to workspacecoolplace.com and enter code Forthright, and you're all set. Okay, so let's talk about security. And I like to talk about security by talking about Constantinople in 1453. Constantinople was under siege for over 50 days and it was very heavily fortified. And in the end, Constantinople did fall in 1453. And by many accounts, it was because of a simple thing. One of the gates on the outer wall was left unlocked. And because that gate got breached, between the outer wall and the inner wall was breached, the hordes flooded in, and it was the beginning of the end for Constantinople. And I use this as a metaphor, and maybe this is, we can kick off and discuss this, as the idea that your endpoints could be that unlock gate. And what you want to do is you don't want to have one of your endpoints be the point of a breach, especially now. I think it's even more critical than ever, as you've got end users that are out there, working over dirty networks, working from home on, potentially questionable machines, and how we can prevent that, I think, is really critical. Timo Marino joined us.
Carl, I think that's a welcome, Frank, by the way. I think that's an interesting image, because that is certainly how we used to build networks over the years, right? Going back decades. Now with our data and SaaS products, delivering applications from all over the place, even the strategy of how we secure our most valuable resources has to change, because we can't go with this kind of analogy anymore. And the endpoints, securing them and securing the individual users and everything that they interact with becomes really the last line of defense. We can't count on what we have in the data center anymore, because that's not actually where all of our data lives on a regular basis. So that's a really interesting scenario. It's also interesting that from the poll that we took, most people picked security and obviously support of the infrastructure is one of their biggest challenges for work from home. What we found is most of our clients, they already had certain work from home programs, but they were assuming 15 to 20% of their workforce was actually going to work from home. They and you know, obviously you plan for that, and there were very specific personas that did that. They didn't have to plan for every single role in their organization, and the majority of people working from home and so quickly. So we've seen a lot of customers sort of get it out there, you know, provide the access because the business has to function and continue. And now the conversation is, okay, we did it. And now we see a lot of problems, a lot of challenges, a lot of concerns. How do we improve the experience? How do we improve security? How do we improve the management? It's great that Sally's working from home on her own laptop, but I've got her connecting through the VPN, and you know, God knows what's going on with her computer because it's being shared with other people in the house and all sorts of other things. The other thing is compliance that came up. 70% of you said that was one of your concerns. So that would be an interesting point to discuss as well.
If you don't mind, I'd like to add something. I'm really glad that you brought up that case study customer, the sunglasses customer. I think you described it as, right? And when I first met them, it was quite an interesting deployment, a very big deployment all over the world, many different locations. And what they told me is that we love IGEL because it's just enough OS. And I said, well, what do you mean by just enough OS? And they said, when you look at a fat client, you have doors all over the place. You know, you have this component, this component, and they're all attack surfaces, right? There are entry points for hackers. What we were able to do is slim down the operating system to something with just enough, that just what we needed, and in return close all those doors and make the environment a lot more secure. The other thing to know too, and Carl mentioned that about you don't need a fat client, but when you think about a fat client, or then you think, or not having one, you think, well, I need remoting, I need Citrix, the cloud workspace, VMware, Microsoft, what have you. This customer also doesn't actually use that. They have everything running locally through our custom partition feature. So it is a thin client in traditional terms, but it's also a verbose client that you can do much more than just, you know, run cloud workspaces on. You can have a hybrid too, where you're going to run, let's say, Zoom locally or Teams locally, and then your apps that come down from the cloud. So those are the 2 points I wanted to make.
Yeah, we looked at the survey. Oh, go Frank.
Yeah, to that point, Doug, you know, we're seeing use cases where the use of the local device is actually becoming much more prevalent. And I think this is something that you have to think a little bit outside of the norm, because while you have technologies, VDI-based technologies, published apps, those are still very important, and there's always a really great use case for them. But as everything's becoming so SaaS focused, there are scenarios where some of those technologies are not necessary for all workloads. We have a medical client that is spread across 80 different centers, 2,600 seats, and that's exactly how they use it. They have an ERP application that requires you know, a published application, but everything else, and I mean everything else, is taking advantage of that custom partition that's there. Super powerful, because I mean, it is Linux after all, and we're able to get their collaboration suite, their communication, their productivity, and then all this ERP application running within Chrome or Firefox, depending on, you know, what their preferences are. So I think that's awesome, because that just enough is, I'll have to steal that going forward.
It's interesting you say that, because Carl opened the conversation around the concept of a workspace versus a desktop, right? And I think that's definitely where everything's moving.
Yeah.
What is a workspace? does that mean just local application? If you think about Windows, you're thinking about Windows applications, right? But in today's world, it's not just Windows applications, right? As Frank mentioned, you have a lot of SaaS applications. You know, what you need today is an environment that's secure, that's flexible, that's easy to manage, that's affordable, that you can bring all those into the fold, then deploy it anywhere, any place, anytime, right? I always describe it as the Citrix story, that at any place, anywhere, anytime, but for the device itself, right? And that's very powerful. We're all bought onto the old Citrix story. Let's just do that for the device itself, right?
Yeah, we did a poll earlier to kick off this session. We talked about, kind of pain points and challenges. We're also doing a survey right now at IGEL, and one of the questions we're asking that survey is, what are your biggest endpoint challenges? And maybe not surprisingly, the number one answer from the respondents, we had 102 people respond to the survey, all from Fortune level clients, but the number one answer was security and user experience, followed by just security, followed by just user experience. And then the fourth was troubleshooting support. But those three things, right? Security, user experience, and support seem to be, really key focus for, most organizations that are trying to figure out, in this new world order, how do we operate?
Carl, that makes me think about two things, and it kind of goes back to my opening. I think we should talk about a little bit why leveraging UMS is so effective when these devices are distributed all over the place. And then the other thing is that when we are using workspaces and we are using users that are working from home and they're not necessarily running a virtual desktop, or maybe they are, but lots of SaaS apps, how do we effectively gauge their user experience? How do we improve upon that if we can't measure it? And obviously there's some very unique capabilities of IGEL and connections to other third-party products as well that we've found very effective at understanding what an end user is actually experiencing, and we can see far beyond what's happening in an RDS session or a Citrix session that is very unique to this environment. I think that's I find that when I have these conversations with our clients, they're often surprised. Frank can probably chime in on this as well. That seems to be something very unique, and what one of the things that we love about IGEL.
Yeah, I would agree. We had an executive briefing with one of the largest telecommunications companies in Canada, and their SVP of IT said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said essentially, I need to know what's happening for my users almost before they know it, right? So that we can be proactive in, monitoring that user, things that can impact the user experience, and be able to understand if something is not optimal, how can we get to that point, to whatever it is that's creating that issue.
Yeah, and 60% of our poll showed 60% of you found that UX was very important. I think there was another 30% that was a pretty high priority, which obviously aligns very much with our passion. Doug, you were about to say something.
Oh, no, it's very, thanks, Steve. I think that's another one of the, when again, we talk about IGEL OS being an operating system, and an operating system itself is just basically an operating system. There's nothing there, right? What's so neat about IGEL, or one of the things we talk about heavily, is our partnerships. And when you start talking about UX monitoring, things like that, we love to brag about, we have 90 different integrations within the operating system itself. We have the leading monitoring providers, be that ControlUp or Liquidware, Lakeside, bunches of them that I can't even think of off the top of my head. There's so many you can see there, that depending on what you use internally, we probably already have it baked into our operating system, to where you go back to our what we call the UMS, Unified Management System, Universal Management System server, and just click a few boxes, and then boom, the stuff automatically works, right? The pieces, we've taken out the complexity for you. It's really nice.
Right. I mean, we're a thin operating system, we're ultra secure. We didn't kind of skimp out and say, okay, but we've locked everything down to the point where you can't do anything, right? So the IGEL Ready program is the program we put in place to test out and ensure that these third-party vendors work, and they come out of the box with the hooks and everything you need for to connect to them. With release 11.4, our most recent software release, you can select which of these integrations you want to install, so you don't have to put them all out there. You can pick and choose which was a feature that had been requested quite a bit. But in that analytics kind of pie, right, there are tools like ControlUp, which give you a very easy to use interface to see sort of what's going on. If it's red, it's bad. And again, the IGEL the operating system was built with this idea of being able to manage it, with manageability being one of the core tenets.
Guys, I think one thing that the people on this call may be interested to understand is that, obviously there's this player out there. We may have heard of them before, Microsoft, and they have an operating system too. It may be popular, we don't know. And I think that the reality is that they have a strategy as well. And so when we talk about why to go this route, we've been talking about the security and the user experience elements. Carl, the last thing you mentioned was not skimping out on those particulars that make something like what Microsoft has so powerful, just without some of the negativity that goes with there. And I think it's important to call that out, because there are going to be different strategies, and it's important that when you're looking at your entire workspace delivery, you're going to have situations where sometimes you're going to have to still use those other guys like Microsoft. The difference here is that in those one-offs or those niche type of experiences, you can still leverage IGEL with that and bring in that experience that when that workspace requires it. But what you'll find is that ultimately there's so much of this that can be covered within just the IGEL, very, very slim and powerful, and not have to worry about some of the extras that come with it. But I wanted to make sure that was thrown out there, because there are going to be different schools of thought, and there's going to be scenarios where someone may want to do that, and they're going to ask themselves, what happens when I have a mixed workload or things and this, that, or the other. And I think it's important to understand that I think that that's something that IGEL has accounted for, and it's important to realize that.
Frank, that's really interesting. I think IGEL's focus on this software as a key component here allows to address a lot of those different workloads in different ways. And it's not just the fact that whether or not you're using a workspace or using SaaS apps, even down to the devices. I like the fact that maybe we have Wise devices or we've got HP devices, and we can actually bring those in and manage those in the same console, convert those over. Or maybe you're doing a BYOD program, but you have the UD Pocket. And this way, that's great. Bring your laptop. I'm going to plug in a little tiny USB stick, and I get to hold on to that asset, the license in the back end. All I've done is ship you a USB device. And what that does is it immediately allow me to push down and enforce policies that are going to help me adhere to security requirements and compliance requirements. And I know that when you connect, because you're connecting with this device, I don't have to worry about that endpoint. And I can see that endpoint and I can understand all of its performance without actually installing anything on the end user device. And that's really important, because if it's my laptop, I may not want you installing various agents or whatnot on there. The other thing is of course, as an organization, shipping out assets, especially if you're in a contact center type of scenario, you may not want to ship out expensive assets to customers, and being able to ship out a UD Pocket where they can plug it into their laptop gives them a lot of flexibility, and that's managed remotely. So when it plugs in, it connects, talks to the mothership, and at this point, you're able to push down and change configuration on the fly with these devices, which I think it's a very powerful tool for internal IT departments. Makes life a lot easier, I'm sure, and we probably should have asked this in the poll. My guess is a lot of the people on the call are probably challenged because we never wanted to support end users' home devices, home networks, and yet we don't have a choice, right? Because you got to work, and we're trying to help you work, and now all of a sudden you're not in our carefully controlled environment that we built. Nothing was planned, right? I mean, and if your house is anything like mine, I got 3 kids. There's all sorts of Zoom sessions going on, all these devices on my Wi-Fi. I can't control what's happening, and then Lord knows what's running on your PC. If I can boot into a secure environment, whether it's because I've sent you a terminal or using a UD Pocket, I can now very closely control what's happening in that session, and then also monitor it so I can actually tell the end user, hey, listen, I'm seeing bandwidth issues and latency issues, and this is why you're having a poor experience, because your session on the back end looks great, your device looks great. or if there is some kind of an issue with a particular device, you'll be able to read that too. And that is very unique. I don't think there's any other terminal solution or remote device solution that actually does that. So
that's a great point, Steve. I mean, I'll do a little plug. IGEL, we were recently awarded by Citrix their Showcase Video Spotlight Award, and the topic, we took a humorous look. We worked with the guys from Pittsburgh Mercy Hospital, and we did a video called "Users with Dirty Endpoints," and it was like, again, playful look at, hey, when you send everyone home and they've got something they're working on their kid's computer or whatever else, the support nightmare is real, right? The pain is real. And using something like a UD Pocket, which, I've got one right here. I mean, it's tiny, right? But you can send this home and say, hey, this is your key. Plug this in, boot from this. I don't care what's on the hard drive at this point, right? I mean, when we promote the UD Pocket, oftentimes we'll say, hey, you don't even need a hard drive technically in the device, right? You can just put the UD Pocket in there and you're good to go. And that video came about though because we were talking with, again, this end user of IGEL about some of the benefits they saw, and it kind of organically came up. They said, it was, some of the support calls were kind of funny as people were, again, it's not because everyone's got a PC at home, but when everyone has to work at home, kids, spouses and whatever else, not everyone's got one device per person. So you're going back and you're pulling old devices, right? You're pulling that PC from the garage or that MacBook. Or again, true story, the case of Pittsburgh Mercy, they had a laptop that had a Y2K compliance sticker on the bottom of it, right? And a customer's like, hey, can I use this?
It worked.
And it worked. So I think it's a great point, Steve.
Yeah, it's the other.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, the other thing about it is that once you touch that device, you own that device, right? We've all experienced that. So we don't want to touch those things. We don't want to install anything on those devices. Just plug in that little UD Pocket and away you go. The worst part about the UD Pocket is they're so small you lose them. So attach it to your keychain so you don't do that, right? But then you might think, okay, well, how do we secure it, right? How do we have this thing on the operating system secure? How do we communicate it with it? Do we need to buy more VPN licenses? Do we need to deploy the VPN? We don't have that. Well, it's real simple. IGEL has something called the Cloud Gateway, the IGEL Cloud Gateway. And this is a very simple piece of software that you install in the cloud, in the DMZ, Amazon, Azure, what have you. And then it secures that traffic from our management server down to the endpoint itself. And then we can securely manage those devices anywhere, anyplace, anytime. So it's just extremely powerful. And the last thing I'll say about the UD Pocket is we sort of, I hate the phrase, but I'll say it, we drink our own champagne. I like the dog food comment myself. But anyway, when COVID hit, we had to work from home too, right? The folks at IGEL, and you think we would all have IGEL Thin clients at home, but we don't, believe it or not. We sold them all, right? So how did we get our developers to work? We gave them all UD Pockets, and within one day, all these guys were working again, right? And some of them have Linux boxes, some of them have Windows boxes, some of them have Mac. But in one day, we're able to immediately get all these guys up and running via IGEL technology.
Doug, it's an interesting connection between how small the devices are and the fact that you lose them. We've had some interesting use cases where, and I know this is not what people are talking about now, but ultimately, at some point, many people, I don't know about everyone, but many people are going to go back to the office. And I know that for many financial institutions, when we're upgrading and changing out branch locations, obviously it's easy to bring people up to a thin client session. Of course, the problem is that the local PC that was there before and the end user has been using for quite some time inadvertently always has some kind of data or some kind of application you missed, because there's just too many of them. And so you can't go in and wipe the device out, and obviously you don't necessarily want to take that overhead with you. So a great solution during any kind of migration project is also to take your UD Pocket, plug it in, have the user connect. And the truth is, if they ever realize, oh my goodness, you know what? I haven't used this program in a week, but I need it, and I forgot. Well, you unplug it, reboot the machine, go back, grab what you need, and you haven't lost it. And you go through a certain period of time where at some point you can either keep on running the UD Pocket indefinitely, or you can replace it with a thin client terminal, a physical terminal after a given period of time. So these devices can be reused. They can be used for migration projects. They can be used now for work from home. And those people who want to come back in, at this point now they're fully working from home. They can either bring that back in and plug it into their device at the office, or just jump onto a terminal. The experience would be exactly the same because it's all managed from the same console. So it's quite useful. It's really been a very interesting device, and I commend IGEL for allowing us to move to the model where we can manage the license versus the key, because I think we need a disposable solution. I need something that I can send out to somebody, and if they leave for whatever reason, I don't need it back because it's disposable. I hold the license, I own it as an organization. Great, you can keep the little USB key, that's totally okay. And when you pair that with other devices like voice over IP and headsets, all of a sudden I don't need to send $1,500 of gear to somebody's house. I can spend under $100 and actually set you up so you're able to work. And I think that's really empowering.
Yeah, I think you're
right. Go ahead.
My wife had to send her laptop. She had an issue with her laptop. She had to ship it back, and someone else in her region needed it too. And the IT folks were like, "Oh, just stick them both in the same box." And I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is a bad idea, right? This box was designed for one laptop, and now we're sandwiching two of them in here and taping it up and whatever else. So the less you have to ship gear around, obviously the better it is for your organization overall.
Well, that's assuming that the person will send it back too. I mean, that's something we've seen with a lot of our contact center customers and clients, that they're concerned about sending out these devices, and when people leave the organizations, they don't always send the equipment back. And you've got to deal with that and collect it and log it. And I think using this technology as a strategy, you just don't worry about any of that anymore. You can focus on actually getting somebody to work right away and removing having to support anything they've got on their side, whether you're using a terminal, a thin client device, or the UD Pocket. You essentially solve for both problems.
Yeah,
I love it. I'm glad you brought up the licensing piece, because one that came from, it wasn't the way it was to start with. And one of the things I really love about IGEL from a sort of outsider perspective, or a guy, that's worked at different software companies, been in this industry a long time, is we listen. We heard this from our customers, and we changed the way we did licensing because of that. And I think that's really needed. It's the same with custom partitions, our ability to install applications locally. We heard it from our customers and we changed it. And that's a real testament to our leadership team. They're not just trying to, oh, this is the way it is, we want our money. No, we listen and adapt. It's a great company.
Doug, I love having you on this spotlight series. And I think a lot of times we forget that some people don't actually understand all the benefits, or not familiar with all the benefits of thin client computing. And I think as people who are working in technology, it's kind of a given, but the truth is we have to educate people on a regular basis and share stories. It'd be great to talk a little bit about your history, because I think you enjoying this product and what they represent and how they go about doing it, to me, speaks volumes because of your background and your history. And we all make the assumption that everybody on this call knows who Doug Brown is. And they probably should, but they may not. You want to maybe talk a little bit about your perspective, because you've been able to see so much of this, unfold over the years.
Well, I think Carl really told my story when he started up. Anybody my age, or not anybody, but anyone my age that started off with computers as a kid, we grew up in sort of the mainframe world, moving into the PC world, right? And that's how I was. And so my father was a mainframer. He taught me about centralization. He taught me the benefits of centralized management, centralized deployment, centralized security. My first machines were thumb terminals that connected to mainframes and microcomputers. Then I got into, of course, PCs, right? Because I was a kid and who didn't love those toys, right? And then I moved into the workforce. And then I was introduced to Citrix. And I still say Citrix is the most beautiful thing my eyes have ever seen. And I have 2 children. So it shows you how much I love Citrix, or what a poor father I really am. But because it brought that promise of what the mainframe was to the world today, right? To the tools and the applications and the infrastructure and the requirements of today, right? And then so I sort of jumped on that bandwagon, and like a lot of us, there's many people just like me, got into it in those days. And I know Steve and Carl and Frank and Matt, you guys have been there the whole time too, and we just watched this thing grow. COVID's been very interesting, because COVID to us, everything we've talked about, COVID sort of legitimized, right? And it's sad that it took COVID to do it, but everything we, to us was like, oh yes, if you're a Citrix customer or a Microsoft or VMware, it just works. So it's the best way to compute in my mind. Just a little bit about my history, I guess, but it's not. I'm not unique, just old.
Well, come on,
that
Doug,
helps, Steve?
SE of the year 2003.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I don't know. Listen, before we met
resource
personally,
people in the early, so
we've been Citrix partners since '95 and have been doing all sorts of thin client implementations, using Microsoft and VMware and now Nutanix builds and whatnot. And I remember before we met personally a while back, reading so many of your publications and your guides, and you've just been very active and vocal and open, really, about how to do this right. It is amazing, because if you think about if this would have happened maybe even 5-10 years ago, I think we'd be in a much worse case situation. Organizations have been able to adapt in many ways. The excess amount of bandwidth available is one key thing, because thin client's not necessarily new, but it took a while to proliferate the messaging and for companies to start leveraging it. And then it was just a matter of scaling what most companies already had to some degree. Like I said, most of our clients planned for and had a strategy for 20% of people working from home. So it is really quite interesting, and it's a shame COVID brought this on for all of us to witness the power of it. It'll be interesting to see what happens next, because maybe in a year from now, when this is no longer an issue and the vaccine's out there, and some companies attempt to go back to the way it was before, and I don't know if that'll ever happen, but more people will obviously go back to the office, and some verticals have no choice. They have to work in the office. Will they go back, or will they continue to leverage these technologies? For us, we've been pushing application delivery as a strategy. And the idea is not necessarily to use a Citrix or a Horizon to deliver this application. I mean, you can do that, but the minute you choose it as a strategy across the board, end to end, it solves so many problems. It has its own management things you've got to worry about, but the point is now you've kind of picked a way that you're going to deliver your applications to your end users, and you remove a lot of if-thens. I don't know that many companies or most companies went that route. Some did, and they reaped the rewards. With COVID, you're kind of forced down that route because it was the only way to effectively get people to work from home. Because let's face it, most of these applications, if they're not SaaS, were not designed to work over any VPN. Your experience is just terrible. And the VPNs were not even sized adequately for this, and they don't have time to provision what they need and so on. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens across the board, these different industries and verticals, as people head back to the office.
We have a slide. I didn't have this slide that we have that kicks off. This is it's a survey. What led your digital transformation journey, right? And option A is the CEO, option B is the CTO, and then option C is COVID-19. And COVID-19, by and large, was the key leader of most digital transformation initiatives in 2020. I don't think we'll go see things go back. And Doug, I'd be curious, obviously you have a great perspective coming from the community, but what I've heard on the marketing side and working with our customers is that people are looking at a hybrid approach in 2021 and beyond, where it'll be, time shifting, so 2 days in, 3 days in, 2 days at home, for most users, which again, then will necessitate kind of this ability that no matter where you are, in the office, or, working from home, working remote, that you have, a similar experience, similar access everywhere, right? So I think we'll still see that. But Doug, from the community, you seeing, what are you hearing?
It's the same exact thing. I mean, I personally think we will go back to normal. We always do. We're creatures of habits. Human beings are creatures of habit. We need human interaction, and eventually we will go back. I firmly believe that. I hope I'm wrong, but I firmly believe we will. But I think in what I'm hearing is in the next few years is definitely going to be a hybrid and probably moving forward. I do want to comment on one thing Steve said, and that is that if this would have happened 5 years ago, and it actually brings up a really, really valid point. And when you think of a thin client, we're talking about sort of misconceptions too, right? If you think of a thin client, anyone that's tried it maybe 5 or 10 years ago or even longer, they might have this perception that it's slow, it's chunky, it's not secure, it's not easy, it's not powerful, it's a pain in the butt. Nobody wants one. Try IGEL today is all I could say. because there's so many people that said to me, Doug, what are you doing joining IGEL? And then I turned them on to the technology, like, wait a second, this is not at all what we thought it was. This is not at all what the competition's doing, or this is not at all what it was, what we thought it, the last time we tried a thin client, which was 5-10 years ago. So things have, like Steve said, a lot of things have matured and changed over the years. And
That's
IGEL
an interesting comment, because the concept of thin client is in theory, it's all the same. It's a commodity.
Yeah.
And in some degrees it is, but our experience working with so many devices, it's not. They are not all created equal. Go ahead, Frank.
I was going to say, in light of what you just said, Doug, I want to talk about a use case that we saw customers go into. This particular customer has a unique peripheral, unique to their industry, their vertical, and it's a medical dosing pump. And the idea of what they were doing before was they had Windows PCs distributed across all of their centers, and so they had a huge field team dealing with this. This is obviously prior to some of the, I guess, more modern solutions from Microsoft with Endpoint Manager or whatever. But even still, they had people they were literally sending out to these different centers across the states to go deal with that actual individual devices and to just be able to deliver this precise dosing equipment or whatever. And so what we did is we just said, look, give it a shot. Let's show you how this could work. And so here we have a unique piece of medical equipment, and we have over 1,000 users now on this thing, and they're using the custom partition, and it's really created a scenario where we're looking back at use cases that we were delivered in the past and really kind of said, just exactly what you said, give it a shot, and what do you got to lose, right? And I think what people are finding is that as you start looking at that and creating that single workspace, you can make it whatever you need, right? Some in that particular use case, there are certain things that are coming in through RDP as a published app, a seamless app. They have SaaS, they have this application that's running local, drivers for these unique pieces of equipment. And I think that my ask for anyone that's on this call, take a look at those situations, right? Look at the floors for your the corporations that you're working with. Just understand what's there. And I think you're going to find that you're going to be able to manage a lot more devices in a much more streamlined way. And it just seems like it just works. And I won't kid you and tell you that it's not going to be something you'll have to learn, but it is all there, and it is something you can make happen. But I think that when customers are looking at that, they found that their strategy changes significantly for the better. Like everyone that I've polled for this, they've showcased to me that they've happy that they went this route. Their acceleration, part of it COVID, but also part of it being that it works so well. Something that was planned for 3 years out is now this year, and it's like one of those things where you just gotta say, well, that's what happens when things just work, and you gave it a shot. So we're seeing that. So I hope that anyone that's on this call is looking at their different use cases and saying, hey, maybe we should give that a shot. Give it a shot. I like that, Doug. Give it a shot.
Well, I love what you said too about it's the ease of management and you don't, how you explained it. When I back to this company that makes these sunglasses, I did a podcast with the lady that designed everything. It was sort of the main administrator, and I asked her, and I said, one of the questions was, I hear that only one administrator manages your entire global environment. Is this true? Because I feel like I'm lying to people when I say that. She goes, you are lying. I was like, really? I was like, what do you mean? How many people? She goes, a half a person. So well, how's a half a person? They said one person logs in maybe once a month, or if that. And she said, what you did is we set it up, and at that point it turns into automation. You have a new UD pocket, a new thin client, a new converted device. It connects to the wire, pulls down the configuration that we've defined ahead of time, and they're off and running. The only time we need to use it is I'm sorry, what is it, Carl? Carl, you'll know this better than me. It's something like 5,000 locations. How many users are on
No,
that?
so 7,000 locations, around 13,000 endpoints, because it's roughly 2 per location.
I think that puts it in
Okay.
perspective. Because try doing that
Huge.
with
Huge.
PCs.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
And if something
It's
goes
quite-
bad, well, they just plug it in. It's a phenomenal case study. Phenomenal case study. I overuse it because it's so great.
And
Gentlemen, we have a question, if you guys have a moment to answer one.
Sure.
This person said, we tried UD Pocket but found it difficult to support because not all PCs and laptops would boot off USB device, and many didn't understand how to change the default boot device. Any good suggestions on how to overcome this issue?
I could probably take this one. I know it was something we were going to close out on. You know, we've created a kit and we've been working with some clients on an agent in a box solution. And one of the things that was really important that made this work was to create exceptional documentation. Yes, they have to go into the BIOS for many of these devices and enable it, but usually there's 2 or 3 iterations of that. And if you've documented each one, the end user can literally try each one until they get it. And you might have to help them at home, but if they have a piece of paper that ships with that device that's branded and that is specifically configured, that is really helpful. The other thing is that there is a pretty extensive device list that explains kind of which devices are supported, and you can look that up, which will save a lot of time, because if the end user calls up and says, hey, this is the machine I've got, you can actually look up to see whether or not it's going to work and save yourself some time so you don't spin your wheels trying to get a device that really is too old. But I have to tell you, I've seen 5-plus-year-old laptops work without a problem. As a matter of fact, I almost feel like the older ones are easier because of the way the BIOS works. They're a little simplified. That might be something that if you want to reach out to us, we could definitely talk to you about and see if we can help you out. We'd be happy to share some of the documentation that we've created, and you can see whether or not that is useful for your community.
Also, whoever asked the question, just know that please make sure you're always grabbing one of the later versions of when you're using UD Pockets. Just make sure that they're fully updated before you try that. We've seen that as well. You know, you have depending on the IGEL version you were using. You know, obviously as they continue to push out those updates, so do the drivers that come with it, and thus you got to be, you know. But ultimately, if it's not there, you know, one of the great things about working with IGEL is you could just say, look, I got this use case, I need to make this happen. As long as it's physically possible, I don't see why they don't try to make that work.
Well, you also can send out for those corner cases, you can send out, they're fairly inexpensive, a full on terminal, and just send that out. Here's your device, plug your monitor into it. You know, and obviously it's not quite as cost effective, but it is still far less expensive than sending out, let's say, a full laptop and then having to deal with the support on it. The nice thing is the policy management and the security management, all of that is baked in. It doesn't matter which device you're using. And so, you know, not every solution works all the time, right? You try to, you know, work for the masses and then make sure that you can cover your corner cases.
Also, when you're looking at, I don't know what the thought process was for when you were looking at UD Pocket, whether that was like an intentional work from home or a BYOD strategy, whatever it may be. When you're looking at that kind of a strategy, you want to think about polling your users. And if you set up a simple survey form where people can like jump in, put in their information, say this is the device I have, something like that. Those are really easy to set up. Really inexpensive to make happen. That would be one of the suggestions I'd have for you. That way you can kind of pull a list of what your users have, and you're going to see similarities. And as soon as those similarities happen, to Steve's point, you can have it either documented, you can create some videos. It's easily posted on YouTube, and the kit that you deliver to your users, right? They just kind of pick from their list, right? I have a Lenovo Yoga whatever, and they go, oh, okay, here's the link I got to go to, and boom, there you go. If you guys are nice enough to put it on your intranet or something like that, they may be able to, you know, kind of watch that through and be able to set themselves up. And those are the kind of things that, you know, we'd recommend. Just make sure they're mobile friendly, because obviously they're using their PC to connect and they need their mobile. So
you also can reach out if you want to talk about a managed service specifically designed to provide support for this. So we've worked with customers where the endpoint management component is essentially delivered as a service. So the hardware can be delivered as a service, the end user support can be delivered as a service, and at that point, you pick a strategy and you're able to manage it in the back end, but not necessarily have to worry about the every individual user connecting, because you can outsource that particular service delivery. Obviously, if you're rolling that out to large groups of individuals, and the initial rollout's going to take quite a bit of phone calls and coordination, because let's face it, most of our end user population, they're not technical, and they probably have never been in the BIOS before. Obviously, there are services that you can leverage to do so.
I love that you guys are doing this, I think, because when it comes to customer experience, the #1 rule is customer education. It's not just technology and tools and that, it's education is the first step. And that's exactly what you guys are doing. It's really brilliant.
Yeah, you can see the front side of that documentation. We try to make it really easy for people to follow, where it's not overly verbose. And if you go down this route, you're actually able to address many of the security and compliance issues too. The technology capabilities of bundling certain applications, and because of all the plugins and partnerships that IGEL has, allow us to add a lot of capabilities to rolling this device out, which helps with not just security, but your compliance requirements. One of the things that we see from a lot of our clients is, listen, now that everybody's working from home, I have no clue what people are doing. How do we know what's actually going on? Are they actually working? Sometimes there's measurable KPIs and sometimes there's not. And obviously we can bolt on specific technologies to these kits that allow us to see all the way down into what they're doing. Are they doing anything that would pose security risks? For example, we have the ability of, if I picked up my phone and I try to take a picture of the screen, you can even have the embedded camera actually recognize that, hey, there's somebody doing something that's inappropriate, flag that, sort of like what a SOC service would do. The options are almost endless that people are unaware of. And you can bake that into these kind of kits and then back that with certain types of managed services. And, I brought this up in the beginning of the conversation that there's kind of 3 categories, and you can see that the foundation is for people that say, I want to do it all, but I don't have all the tools. Can you help me deliver the tools? I'm going to handle the IT services side, but I want to leverage your best practices, and I want to leverage your SOPs and whatnot, and we're going to run from there, and that's your foundation. And then, some clients say, we're going to do it together. There's certain heavy lifting components that I need you guys to do, and we're going to do other components, which is your enhanced layer. And then, of course, the complete is, I don't do any of it. I want to focus on my business. And, we're going to have Forthright handle this technology set completely end to end. And we'd love to talk to any of you if you have questions on how these services work, the different pricing models. Reach out.
Yeah, and when we did it, it's interesting. We talked about the survey IGEL's running right now. We ran a survey we funded a survey run by ESG Research. And, one of the questions they asked in that survey was top 5 benefits of, desktops as a service, as DaaS. So the first benefit, 39% of respondents said, improve security by keeping sensitive data off devices. And that's interesting. But what I thought was more interesting was actually the second most commonly cited benefit at 35% of respondents was the reduced IT operational expense from the outsourcing of the end user support for those devices. So obviously, when you have a DaaS service, you are alleviating some of that support burden that you have overall. And, we look at things like what you guys are doing with Agent in a Box and the managed desktops that Forthright offers, that really does help a lot. And we even heard it from the participants in this panel, right? Is support was one of the key issues that they're looking at in terms of remote, people working remote. So, less time you're spending on resolving trouble tickets, the more time you can spend on figuring out, ways in which you can leverage IT to help grow your business.
By the way, IGEL is exceptional at supporting, and obviously with our partnership as well, supporting pilots. So if there's anybody in the audience that actually wants to get their hands on any of these devices and try it in your environment, or if you don't have an environment, we can set up a cloud environment for you to log in and test. We'd be happy to help and work with you on that. So definitely reach out to Matt or hit success@forthright.com and let us know. We'd be definitely glad to get involved. Kristen, are there any questions from any of our audience?
There were a couple here, Steve. I just wanted to kind of address. One of which, what are the major differentiators of iGel versus Dell-Wise and other thin client manufacturers? I have my own take on that, but I'm curious to hear Doug's.
It's difficult for me to answer that question, to be honest with you. I'm extremely biased, but I will sort of paraphrase somebody. My job at IGEL is to run the IGEL community, and I have the best job at IGEL because I get to work with our customers and our partners and the engineers, the folks doing the work in the trenches, right? And someone posted just a few weeks ago something about I was forced to use I think it was Dell-Wise, and he just went on and on and on about how simple iGel was, how easy it was, how powerful it was, and how antiquated the competition was. And I think that really sums it up. You know, the other thing is we're dedicated to thin client, you know, to our operating system. That's what we do as a core competency. Dell is their core competency is not selling, expanding Weiss. Weiss really hasn't improved to the levels it could since the acquisition, right? That's not what they're in business for. That's not where their passion is. And they're more into, you know, selling servers and boxes and things of that nature. So my opinion is sort of definitely, you know, skewed, but I'll go off of what our community member said, and it's just night and day. He was very happy to return back to the UMS.
Yeah, just that last point though. I mean, Dell wants to sell, hardware. That's the business they're in. So I mean, even ThinOS 9 came out from Dell, and the backward compatibility is spotty at best, right? So now you've either got to bifurcate, and I've got some ThinOS 8 devices, got ThinOS 9 devices. I can't run ThinOS 9 across all the Dell devices I have, and Dell wants you to just buy new devices. You know, so iGel as a software company is focused on the OS. I'd also just say really quickly, you know, content collaboration, Zoom and Teams, you know, again, run circles around Weiss, you know, in terms of performance and in terms of cloud workspace support. I mean, again, ThinOS 9 is great. It's the latest and greatest, and it's awesome, unless you want to connect to VMware, because that's no bueno right now. Or say WVD, because also no bueno. So then you're back to ThinOS 8 to do that. Whereas, you know, iGel out of the box has integrations with all the major cloud workspaces. So I think some of those elements too come into play, and it comes down to focus, right? iGel is an operating system company that also makes thin clients, makes hardware. Dell is a hardware company.
Right.
I think some of the differentiators before we move on, you know, the read-only partition and how that works to drive security out of the box, literally inherently out of the box, is I think very unique. But still, you don't lose the flexibility. Your partnerships and your integration with all those other products are really big, because let's face it, these things don't live in an island. And the fact that you can manage those other vendors from within inside your management console, because let's face it, if you're an organization, the last thing you want to do is switch, you know, platforms and now have to manage from multiple consoles. That's not a good solution, because now you're adding more workload to the admin staff. The truth is at this point, you can leverage your old investment and move forward and actually, I feel, breathe new life into some of those older devices that can be managed by iGel. And it's a significant turnaround. It's interesting to see a Dell device, you know, or Wise device boot up, and it's got the iGel logo, and all of a sudden, all this capability that you didn't have before, and it's like magic. You know, as long as it's on that obviously hardware compatibility list. So I think that's a big differentiator. I don't believe other vendors offer that, anything like that. So
no, and iGel is one of the funnest technologies for me to demo, especially for folks that haven't seen a demo of the iGel management suite, the UMS. You know, once you see it firsthand and you understand, get a good grip of the power of the iGel management console, that's when it really sinks in. And you know, listen, Dell, HP, and others, they make great thin clients. I'm gonna, you know, full transparency, but you know, iGel truly is a software company, and that's their big differentiator, in my opinion.
Yeah, you got it. If you're a Dell shop or an HP shop and you want to buy that equipment because that's what you buy, you have all Dell servers, Dell everything, right? Well, buy Dell thin clients and stick the iGel operating system on top of it. We have a lot of people do that, right? Yep. There's no reason you're stuck to their operating system. Their hardware is great. Utilize it. Put the best operating system on top of it, and you're still going to save money, time, and a heck of a lot of pain and effort.
We have a customer down in Miami. They're actually a Fortune 500 company, and they started with iGel, leveraging the IGEL OS. Okay, we'll see if this iGel software, we can repurpose these old endpoints. They were 12 years old, PCs that were 12 years old. That's where they started. Then they started buying the software with the UD3 Thin client. Love iGel, love the fact that they can save money and really make life a lot easier, managing and updating the endpoints. One other question, I love this question. This one's specifically for Doug. You touched upon it already, Doug, but a little bit, I think. But what made you join iGel?
It's such a good question. It's really such a good question. It was a complete fluke. I think it was the voice of God, to be honest with you, but that's a different story. I was doing a podcast with Jed Ayers, and the podcast went just south. There was a bunch of static on the line. We couldn't do it. And Jed said, and I told him, I was like, I apologize. I can't do this with you. Let's take this offline, or, let's reschedule. I don't want to waste your time. You're busy. He said, hey, why don't you give me a call and I'll tell you the off the record story, right? Guys like me love the off the record stories. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I started, I called him up and started chatting with him. And he starts telling me about what iGel does. And I said, Jed, I know what iGel does. I love the technology. It's great stuff. He goes, the problem is, Doug, you know this. Brian knows this. Frank knows this, but the world doesn't. Well, I guess I was feeling a little bit obnoxious that day. And I said, well, hire me, man. I'll tell the world, right? So he's like, oh, you want to come work with us? And I was like, well, I don't know about that. He said, you just said that. So yeah, I know a bunch of people at iGel just from my travels, and I liked what they were doing. I live in Berlin nowadays, and I sort of wanted to sell this stuff and share this stuff. I talked about my past. I came from the old days where I believe in a thin client. The problem about the thin client, it was never good enough. But iGel was. So I wanted to complete the story. And so I joined 4 years ago in January. So January is my 4th year. And I've had the best time at iGel I've had in my career. Probably better than my Citrix days, which is remarkable because those were amazing days. For one, you're young. It was a lot of fun. But it's really been remarkable. And it's been remarkable because you're able to tell this story. Like Matt, like you said, when you demo this thing and someone sees it and like, wait a second, you could do this? It reminds me of selling Citrix in the 90s. They're showing somebody's Citrix in the 90s where they're like, I can do that? No, and so it's really been a blast. That's sort of how I ended up. And I tell you, once I did join the company, I was in Bremen in January at the kickoff. It's snowing, it's freezing cold. I thought to myself, how do I get out of this? Do I just run? They know me. I can't. But like I said, it's been the best decision I've ever made in my life. I love this company. So absolutely.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
That's a decent answer.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna wrap up here, gentlemen. I just want to say that everyone will be following up with you in the next few days. I might even send you all the link to the IT Ballers video we did, Forthright and iGel, which stars many of the people here on the screen. So look for that in your email, along with the lunch credit instructions. And on behalf of Forthright, I'd like to thank our sponsor, iGel, and Carl and Doug for being here today, and all of you for your time. We know you have a busy day, and we're glad you chose to spend some time with us. So with that, everyone, have a great day, and thank you for being here.